Point 10, the phrase, quote, kept on torturing his righteous soul, end quote, is important and very different than it is translated in the general translators. The general translators translate as if it is in the passive and he is receiving the torture. See, the 1995 version of the New American Standard, or the NAU as it's often called, says, felt his righteous soul tormented. He felt his righteous soul tormented as if it, it was someone else that was causing this, right? It's the circumstances certainly are the reason for him to cause his own soul to be tormented. Okay, it's not that he is feeling his righteous soul being tormented. Okay, so the general translators translate it as if it was passive and he's receiving the torture, but the word is in the imperfect active. Lot is torturing his own soul by staying in this environment. In addition, by understanding human nature, in other words, the old sin nature, we should have a very good understanding of it. The more you mature, the more you understand the old sin nature, right? And you can understand it personally, but you can also understand it generally. You can see behavior in individuals and you can say, I know what's happening there. I know about that old sin nature. I know what they're doing or what they're not doing or whatever. Not that you're judging people. You're just aware of the old sin nature around you, okay? So understand the old sin nature. One can surmise that he is also playing little mind games and allowing himself to be mentally involved in these activities. Semicolon. I.e., comma. Lust after what he is not actively participating in. So in other words, he's not leaving. He's hanging around because he enjoys vicariously seeing this stuff going on. And he puts on the facade that it's an affront to him, right? Oh, ooh, but ooh is what he's really saying. He's how do we know that? Because he's staying there. He's not leaving. If it really, was torturing him to the point where, he would go away from it, but he's not. And he's getting tortured because he wants to participate, but he knows that he's not supposed to. So he has that mental anguish associated with being being malfunctioning by malfunctioning. There we go. I'll get my English correct eventually. Anyway, the idea is that he's staying in that environment because he kind of likes it. Okay. Continuing the point. He is keeping himself, I was going to say what I just said, but you can put it in your notes. He is keeping himself in an area of his weakness and not using his knowledge of doctrine to get rid of this torture. All he has to do is leave, comma. But his greed and lust will not allow him to do that. See, he has land, he has flocks, he has money, and then he also has this lust. He's in an area, like the individuals that go to Vegas, and they're only going to, the gambaholics that go to Vegas, and they're just going to go there because they're just going to go see a show. They're not really going to gamble, right? But they get into the casino and they smell the smells of the casino, and they see the instant cash available in the ATMs, and they see people winning money, and they never, for whatever reason, see the people losing the money, and there's a torture there. If you want to try and, if you're an alcoholic or a gambaholic, you don't want to gamble, but you put yourself in this situation, and so what happens? You have mental anguish. Man, I really want to do that, but I know I shouldn't, but I want to, but I know I shouldn't, but I want to, and your mind goes, you become double-minded, as we saw in James. Right? That's the situation. All he has to do is leave, but the greed and lust won't allow him to do that. He has land, he's powerful in the city, and he has power lust overriding his doctrine. We see that he's sitting in the gate. He's got power lust. Okay? Continue the point. Peter once again uses the word, quote, righteous, end quote. To be sarcastic while also being technically correct. See, lots of believer, he has plus R from God, so he's righteous, but he's obviously not operationally righteous. And so Peter is using the word in this sarcastic way because Watt is righteous, he's just not acting righteous. Okay? Point 11. The torture, the quote, torture, end quote, is continuous. The phrase, quote, day after day, end quote, tells us that Lot is constantly in the state of soul misery. This is self-inflicted discipline or self-induced misery. So remember, when it comes to discipline, that God doesn't always discipline you directly. God will often allow you to discipline yourself, right? You have self-induced misery. Yeah, the example, I used to love the example that Jack used to give because it made so much more sense. It made sense to me, right? Is you go to hang a picture and you don't prepare properly, and you go to hammer in the nail, and you find out that where you're trying to put the nail, actually there's some concrete there or something like that, and so you get all angry and you move over and dang it, well, I'm going to hang this picture anyway, right? Now you're out of fellowship, and you move over and you go to put the nail in, and what do? You whack yourself with a hammer. Right? That's self-induced misery. It's God telling, it's a discipline saying, get back in fellowship. Do everything as unto the Lord, even hanging pictures. Okay, so the idea is what Lot is doing is self-induced misery. He can end it at any time. All he has to do is leave and start functioning properly. But he's not. He's convinced himself that, ooh, I'm needed here. Right? We do the exact same thing. We put ourselves through this self-induced misery. How many times do you have something that you lust after and God says no? Yeah, but, and God says no. Yeah, I got to work around it. I got to figure out some way to do it. And God says no. And so you keep working until finally God says, okay, and you get it, and it's self-induced misery. All right. All you had to do was when he said no, say okay and walk away. But you know better. You know better than God. Right? That's what Lot's doing. Lot knows better than God. See, Eve had the same thing. Eve went in every day. She had to eat from the tree of the knowledge of, eat from the tree of life, and she would see the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There was temptation there. That's the pressure. See? But if she's functioning properly, it's not really a temptation. She understands, hey, God says don't eat from that. I'm not going to eat from that. But what happens? She quits using her doctrine, or she quit using her doctrine. She allowed her serpent, her pet, the serpent, okay, indwelt by the devil, to convince her otherwise, to remove the doctrine and convince her that that's what's keeping her down. If she ate that, she would be like the Most High God. So she goes, next time she goes in there, she eats it, right? She didn't have to. She didn't have to succumb to that pressure. Lot is putting himself here. He doesn't have to succumb to it, okay? He knows how to stop it. He just won't. Point 12. Then the last phrase uses a different word for referring to their actions. Remember in verse 7 he used athesmos, here he used onomos. Okay? So he uses a different word for referring to their actions. Quote, onomos, A-N-O-M-O-S, end quote, literally means, quote, not lawful or unlawful, end quote. And is different from lawless. It refers to being against all the laws of God and not just the laws of divine establishment. In other words, this word includes the, quote, laws, end quote, required of the believer, in addition to those laws required of all mankind. here is on the source laws. Their actions described by this word as being against God. See, the first word, lawless, is against man, the laws that man has set up and understanding of the laws of the divine establishment. But here it's really focused even deeper, pinpointing down to the fact that they are truly anti-divine laws here. Okay, there are laws that are not only for mankind, but also for believers, telling us that the people in this city weren't just all unbelievers now that were malfunctioning. Much like Lot. Lot wasn't committing these crimes. And you have believers in the city that were malfunctioning. Okay? Verse 13. Point 13. The verse ends with the parentheses to end the ellipsis. Peter will give us the apodosis of this first class condition in verse 9. Now I know I'm hammering this, but because we spent so much time on, we spent time on Noah, I'm spending time on Lot too. Obviously, you might feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but now I'm going to skin it. Okay, so be prepared. Okay, verse 14, because point 14, because in point 14, I'm going to give you a little bit more information about Lot, but I'm going to really tie it a little bit closer to us and our functions and what we can walk away with from this as well. Okay, then bring it back in to why Peter has chosen Lot as the example. So, point to better understand Peter's comparison with Noah and Lot, we must take a closer look at Lot's function as given in Genesis 18 and 19. I'll give you a chance to go to Genesis. It's the tail end 18. So if you go to 19 and back up a couple verses, you'll see what I'm getting at here as we go forward. Okay. Subpoint A. And this is also for those who maybe are out there listening who haven't studied the Old Testament very much and don't know too much about the people in the Old Testament. I'm going to give you a little bit of information here too. So regarding Lot's lineage and things like that. So subpoint A, Lot was the nephew of Abraham, being the son of his older brother, Haran, Haran. And that's actually not in 18 or 19. That's a little bit earlier when we're talking about Lot being told to leave. Okay, but being the son of his older brother Haran, Haran. This is Lot. He was part of the entourage Terah, T-E-R-A-H, Abraham's father, led out of Ur, of the Chaldees, Chaldees. And we went into this a lot more when we did the biography of Abraham, and I showed you all the maps and everything that was going on. But he was part of the entourage which Terah, Abraham's father, led out of Ur of the Chaldees, northwest along the Euphrates River, to a place named Haran, Haran, in honor of Terah's oldest son, now dead. See, when you're the first people in an area, you get to name it the way you want to name it. Yeah. Like the Powers and the Dobsons and yeah. Okay. Subpoint B. After the death of Terah, Abraham left Haran for the, quote, promised land, comma, end quote, which God had promised him. This act of Abraham is denoted as one of the great acts of faith. By the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews 11:8. So the fact that Abraham was willing to go when God told him to go, and not knowing where he was going, but just that God told him to go and had promised something, is denoted as a great act of faith. In Hebrews 11:8, we have and I'll give you. I'm just going to read Hebrews 8, Hebrews 11:8 through 10, and it says, "By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going." See, that's the big faith part. By faith, he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. So it wasn't just Abraham saying, God says, okay, Abraham, go. It wasn't just Abraham going by himself. He had a family. Family had to go. He had no idea where he was going. He just listened to God, told him to do it, and he said, I'm okay, I'm going to do it. That's the faith. That's the righteous act of a righteous person. See, that's operational righteousness as well as tactical righteousness. Okay. By faith, he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. Verse 10, for he was looking for the city which has foundations, slant beginnings. The word there is not just foundations. He wasn't looking for a place that had cement foundations already set up for him to put his house on. What he's looking at is a place that was a new beginning, a place to start the race of the Jew, okay? Foundation, slant beginning, whose architect and builder is God. Okay, so he is focused entirely on God. That's Abraham. Okay. Subpoint C. If it was faith which prompted Abraham to leave Haran, was it any less faith on the part of Lot? Question mark. Lot had a choice. As evidenced by the fact that his sister, Milcah, Milcah, was left behind. Lot chose to go with Abraham. Yet he was not singled out. For this act of faith, as was Abraham. You got to ask why. Why isn't Lot brought in there? That he had the same faith Abraham had. He left too when God said to go. Tell you why. Because his faith was not in God, but in Abraham. And Lot did not use his faith in God to continue to grow to maturity. See, rather than Lot looking at Abraham and going, wow, Abraham, you are a fantastic example of faith. I want to believe in God as you believe in God. Give me the information I need. I'm sure Abraham would teach Lot, right? Because the head of the household taught the family. That was the responsibility of the head of the household. So Abraham was the teacher for his family. He was teaching doctrine, I'm sure. Okay. And all Lot had to do was listen and just didn't use it. And he could have faith in God, but he didn't. He only had faith in man. He had faith in Abraham. Where Abraham's going to go, I'll go. Okay, God's blessing Abraham. I want to be blessed, so I'm going to stick close to Abraham. Right, like the individuals at work that want to stick to a rising star, right, so that they can advance themselves, hopefully. Right. If you've ever worked in an environment, you know what I'm talking about. There are those people that move up quickly, and there are people that try to latch onto them and move wherever they move. And the idea is that's what Lot was doing. He wasn't using his faith. He wasn't growing. He wasn't maturing, and so he's not recounted in Hebrews the same way Abraham was. It doesn't say Lot by faith also went. There's no mention of Lot. Okay, Subpoint D. Arriving in the land of Canaan, Canaan, both Abraham and Lot prospered so much that, quote, the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, colon, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together, period, end quote. So the whole thing in quote says, the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, colon, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. That's Genesis 13:6. Strife developed between their herdsmen. In other words, both of them had such large herds that they're of sheep and oxen and things like that. Their herdsmen couldn't keep track of them, and were fighting over whose was whose and things like that. You know, I'm not sure why they didn't brand them or whatever, but anyway, it probably wasn't over whose was whose. It's probably over whose animals get to eat where and who's going to get to drink first. And the same thing that you see in westerns where you have cattlemen that are fighting because they're each trying to get the certain amount of land, right? You know, and then the shepherds come in and the cattlemen hate the sheepmen and blah blah blah. Okay, anyway, strife developed between the herdsmen. In an amicable decision, the two decided to part company. Abraham gave Lot the choice of which direction he wanted to go, and into which land he wanted to settle, period. Now, think about this for a second. Abraham is the one who has brought them to this prosperity by his faith in God. He has gotten them to this point where they both have such large herds and everything that they can no longer sustain together, that they have to divide. It's been primarily through Abraham's leadership and direction as he's followed God's plan for his life, right? Now he offers to Lot, hey, look, we've got to separate. Which area would you want? What would be the normal choice of someone who is with his uncle, an older guy, right, who has brought him to this point? The normal human reaction of someone who is moral and someone who is gracious would defer to the uncle, would say, well, this area looks really good, that area is so-so. why don't I take that area and you take the good area, since you got us this far, and you're older than I am and you have more than I do, and blah 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 blah, right? Isn't that what you think would happen? That's what I think most of us would do. That's not what Lot does, right? Okay. Abraham gave Lot the choice of which direction he wanted to go and into which land he wanted to settle. Lot saw the valley of Jordan and how it was like the, quote, garden of the Lord, end quote. So he chose the then fertile area around the base of the Dead Sea. Genesis 13:10. So he picked the prime spot. He said, okay, uncle, I want that, right? Although now a barren area, it was apparently agriculturally productive. Before the cataclysm, that destroyed the twin cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, those cities were already there. The cities were already there, and there was already malfunctioning going on there. Okay, but he picks that area anyway, right? So point E. How do we know that? Because we'll give you a little bit more information here. Point E. Now, this decision to relocate in the area of Sodom was not in itself an act unpleasing to God. Given first choice, he had the right to select the area with the best prospects for prosperity. But prosperity is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, tests to pass. Remember our study when we were studying the growth stages to maturity, and we got to where you crack the maturity barrier and you have testing associated with each of the three phases of maturity. We went over the various types of testing. And remember, prosperity test is one of the tests that very few people who are not really functioning properly with doctrine pass. It is one of the hardest tests to pass. And so here is Lot. He's given the prosperity test, and guess what? He fails from the standpoint that knowing he should know his old sin nature, and his old sin nature is greed, he should say, you know what, if I go over there, that's going to really be hard for me to function properly. I better stay over here. But he doesn't. He allows his greed, he allows his old sin nature to say, yep, I'm being tempted, I'll take it, I want that. Okay, so he's failing the prosperity test. So it is one of the hardest, if not the hardest test to pass. Continue the point. Where prosperity exists, man feels less and less need for God and feels free to act on his own human nature. Now, this may sound funny. I'm sure it's going to sound funny, but we understand prosperity testing from the standpoint of having all kinds of money. You know, the idea of the self-made man, as Jack used to say. You know, the individual that hey, I got here by picking up my own bootstraps, and I can do it. Blah 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 blah. I don't need God. Why do I need God? I can do it. You know, to me, whenever I think of that kind of an attitude, I always think of Ricky Gervais. Ricky Gervais is an atheist. He constantly ridicules Christians, right? Because hey, he made money, he's popular, he's rich, he doesn't need God. What did he need God for, right? You know, and so I always think of him as this example of a self-made man who is anti-God, right? But what we've been reviewing, as some of you know, on Thursday we've been reviewing Proverbs, and one of the things that happened in Proverbs 10 is the verse that talks about the fact that a person's destitute, his poorness is also a fault, right? Oh, I can't go anywhere because I'm so poor. Oh, I can't believe in God because I'm so poor. Everything happens to me because I'm so poor, not because I malfunction, but because I'm so poor. And we see that constantly with the individuals that are on our street corners, that will work for food. You know darn well they won't work for food. Look at what happened in Mesa. One of the longstanding merchants in Mesa, who was a shoe repair shop, which I frequented. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily frequented, but anytime I needed my shoes repaired, I'd take it to him. It's called Lamb's Shoe Repair on McDonald. Anyway, he always did a fantastic job, and he was reasonably priced, and he was very friendly. Well, there was a homeless man that came in and asked for some help, some water or something. I forget what the situation was. And Lamb, he's Vietnamese, I think is what it was. He on his side he spells it Lamb, but it was Lam. Anyway, he helps this homeless guy, who goes out of the store, turns around, comes back in, and kills him. Steals a weapon from him and kills him. Okay. So now the place is closed and everything, but here's an individual, right? That, oh, I need help, and so someone tries to help him, and the arrogance is such that he kills him. Okay. Well, so we understand that prosperity testing can go either, the super rich or the prosperity of being poor. And that's why I said this sounds weird, but the idea of the super poor, they blame everything on being poor. Okay. So he feels free to act on his own human nature. Point F, and this is where I was trying to get. We'll get here just in time to stop. Point F. Following the course of his testing and his failure to pass the tests, the move to Sodom traces his decline in 6 successive steps. I'm not going to give you all 6 of them together, so that's where we're actually going to stop. We're a little bit early, but we're going to stop right there because I want to give you the 6 steps, because this is really, like I said, where I wanted to get, because these steps are the same steps that we go through when we decide we're going to malfunction, when we are going to use our own human nature to be successful, to prove ourselves. I've seen this kind of thing all over the place. We see it in our politicians. I've seen it at work. I've seen it among, even you see it even among school kids. Okay, so these are the things that we're going to get into. Okay, and so with that, we'll go ahead and end.